is the biggest health and fitness related decision you've made in the last year? And how has that impacted your life? Why is it so big?
Well, I got fat, didn't I? Again, a little bit fat. That was. It's probably not the last year though, is it?
It
But
was
that
last April.
last April, so it's
So we're
over.
nearly there, yeah.
Well, it's over a year ago. But the point, well, that's kind of a good point, isn't it? Because it shows that I don't change course that often. So a decision that I made last April is one that I'm continuing to act on now because there's no need to change course. So why would I? But that decision that I made last April was to defatten myself because we'd been getting a bit stressed, hadn't we, about business things, and took my eye off the ball, got a bit fat, went to Next in Scunthorpe. Yeah, Scunthorpe Next. 10 out of 10 would visit again. Need a new pair of trousers and couldn't do up a pair of 32s. And then saw myself in the very unflattering mirrors that they've got there. And they're designed to be flattering.
Yeah.
And the fact that they weren't
Tells you all
was
you need
quite
to
the
know.
wake up call. So I drove home. We drove home, and I think I said words to the effect of, "If you don't support me in this, I'll end our marriage."
I tell you what you did say, and the decision that would class as being in the last year, because you made it then, and then we fell back into old habits, was to take control entirely
Well, we didn't.
of your own food.
Yes, yeah, we didn't fall back into old habits as such, but
It was
not
just
as badly.
I took
Well, yeah,
full control of the kitchen again.
well, yeah, because you cook delicious food, Jess. This is the problem, and something that I'm happy to acknowledge is that as someone who was formerly of porcine disposition, I don't have much in the way of willpower or self control. In fact, I'd argue around food, my self control and willpower is non existent. The only way for me to not eat crap is to just not have it in the house and not expose myself to it. It's like when we go to a supermarket. Do you remember when we met? How
Mm.
jarring it was for me to go down all the aisles of a supermarket because it had been, well, I hadn't done it since I was a child.
Yeah.
You know, if we have the food in the house, the food gets eaten by me if it's not labeled for the kids or labeled for you. So, yeah. Is that my phone or your phone?
Yours. It's all right. I'll turn it off. Yeah, and I hadn't realised quite how not low your willpower is, but quite, well, yeah, I hadn't realised that the food that I was bringing into the house, that I didn't find that attractive. I can't remember what it was. Was it peanut butter or jam or something?
Anything.
There was
Just it's
something.
anything. It's
Mm.
anything. And the thing is, this is partly where I talk about the obesity being a moral issue, not a medical one. I'm quite happy to admit that I have a poor disposition. I have a moral problem with food. Around food. There is
Sloth,
a flaw.
gluttony.
There is a flaw in my character. Gluttony being exactly that's the one. And you can't cure that. You have to replace it with something else,
Yeah. Mm.
something better,
Yeah.
and and obviously take appropriate action to reduce your exposure to it. So replacing it with something better, something I want more is the idea of not keeling over from a heart attack when I'm 45, 50. Cardiovascular disease does run in my family. Similarly, being able to charge around with Connie in the park, I want that more than I want the food. But even then, that's not enough because that's intangible. When the food's right there.
Yeah.
So it's about making sacrifices. Some people are able to have bad food in the house and eat it in moderation.
Mm.
That's some people. I'm not one of those people, and I dare say most fat people aren't those people. So the only solution is to just not have it. Everyone. We're talking a lot about diet, and I want to get away from this. I don't like talking about diet because the bottom line is everyone who doesn't need carers to help them get washed and dressed and out to the shops without talking to strangers knows what is good and bad food.
Yeah.
They do. I'm sorry. It's just cope. People who say they don't. There's excuses and it's cope. And it's about being prepared to make the sacrifices and change your environment so that you can eat the things that you ought to be eating and avoid the things that you ought not to be eating. Yes, it's a little bit more complicated when it comes into like portion sizes and things. But again, sit down, put the food in front of you. Is this enough? Is this the right amount of food to fuel the activity I have done or I plan to do? Deep down, you know the answer to that question.
Plates are pretty much
Yeah,
the same
yeah,
size. You can tell when
yeah.
it's overflowing.
Yeah, and people who don't know the answer to that question, I probably would benefit from seeing a medical person, like a psychologist or their GP, not a fucking personal trainer or a
Yeah.
nutritionist.
Yeah.
That's suggestive. If someone genuinely can't answer that question, that's suggestive of like deep-seated psychological issues
Mm.
that a fitness professional shouldn't be going anywhere near, bluntly. We talk about training now, please.
Yeah, of course. My next question was, how on earth have we come to a place where it is rare, nay, scandalous for you to be talking about training the natural way?
Oh, easy. A pill for every ill. You take this pill or this potion or you pop this needle in your bum and you get these muscles. I wouldn't want that. I wanted that. I remember it's a common refrain among young lads, particularly in their kind of early 20s. They've been training for a little while. They'll say, I want to just reach my natural potential and then I'll think about taking steroids. And I said that over and over and over again. I would say that to myself or when I'm talking about it with people at the gym. And it, it's almost there's also a lot of fence sitting. Oh, not if it's not something I would do, but I don't mind what
It's
someone else
okay
does
for
with
me,
their
but not
body.
for me.
But the fact of the matter is, would you say that about heroin? Heroin, oh, it's okay for them, but not for me. No, these things are illegal drugs. They're dangerous. They're not right, and it is scandalous for me to say that because, again, we live in a uh, we live in a capitalist society, don't we, where the market dictates what is popular and what is right, rather than immovable moral truths as it was before, kind of the
Mm.
20th century. So lots of men with the ability to exercise their will in the market because they've got wealth and money and things. So we're talking men in their late 30s to kind of their 50s who want to be muscular and in shape. Well, you can work with someone like me who's going to turn around to you and say, yeah, how would you feel if we worked together for 3 months and you didn't really see a tremendous amount of progress in the way that you look because these things take a very long time? Or some twonk on social media who's got 65 before and after photos of guys who've gone from having giant guts and bellies to ripped six packs. And obviously, I can't prove this, but you know,
Anyone with half a
there's
brain suppose.
there's possibly a little bit of drug use going on
Yeah.
there, just a little bit. And in the fitness industry itself, it's just not talked about. I understand actually why fitness influencers specifically don't talk about their drug use. I actually don't hold it against them because they have like sponsorship deals. Like there's not a lot of money in fitness content creation in and of itself. How these people make their money, they don't tend to make their money like I do. I remember, I don't know if I said this on a podcast before, but I recall speaking to a lady once who had somewhere in the region of 500,000 or 1 million followers on Instagram. Now, this is going back years before.
When that was a big
Well, it's
deal.
still a big deal now, but it was even more of a big
Yeah.
deal back then. And she was a PT,
Mm.
and she couldn't get clients from Instagram reliably or predictably. Like the money and she made more money from sponsored posts and advertising. So obviously, if you then turn around, she also used anabolic steroids as well for in her contest prep, funnily enough. But if you were to um,
Admit.
admit that publicly, yeah, you would lose those sponsorship deals. You
Yeah.
would lose your income because it's still taboo. Now, why is it taboo? Because everyone knows it's bloody wrong.
And because it's illegal.
Yeah. Well, no, no, no. It's not. It's not actually. No. Let's be technically correct. It's not illegal to take the drugs. It's legal to possess them and to sell them. Although in the UK, insofar as I understand it, steroids fall. I'm not a lawyer. This isn't legal advice to any twat who's listening who thinks that it is. As far as I understand it, steroid use in the UK actually is possession is effectively decriminalised. There are like a special
Right.
subcategory under the Misuse of Drugs Act, so you can possess them, but you can't supply them.
Right.
But I don't know. Again, not a
Okay.
lawyer. The
Right.
point. The point is, in most countries in the world, they are properly illegal. Like certainly
Yeah.
in the States, they are. Um, Large portions of South America. That Brazilian study I always talk about
Mm.
with the shockingly high percentage of people who have used, are using, or are considering using, just in a recreational gym where steroids are illegal down there. So yeah, so it is kind of, it's all cloak and dagger, smoke and mirrors. Yeah, I was talking with a lovely gentleman who came on board with us the other day, who one of the things he said about me is how I'm one of the few people in the fitness industry where he reads my stuff and doesn't want to punch me in the face. I kind of think that's possibly part of it because I don't do smoke and mirrors. I tell people the truth of what's achievable, what isn't, you know. And also, and to anyone also as well who's possibly going, oh well, Phil, what about TRT? That's a medical intervention and things. And yes, it is a medical intervention, and far be it from me to get in the way of what your doctor is telling you should do or ought not to do. But I don't, what I'm talking about is issues of morality, which transcend the realities of necessarily the finer points of law. And I think there's a difference between having TRT to alleviate general distressing and debilitating symptoms associated with low testosterone and health complications associated as such.
Yeah.
For example, you know, I know of people that have like the creams and things to treat Parkinson's disease, so low testosterone associated with Parkinson's disease, but it's all very low dose, and having it for primarily aesthetic purposes. Even if it's prescribed, and even if it's prescribed by a doctor, again, far be it for me to say you should not do what your doctor says, but you know, need I remind people of the CAS review that found these doctors were prescribing these gender bending drugs without really much thought as to the long term consequences or whether or not it was really the right thing to do. So and or the whole kind of that virus that must not be named and the issues of the mandatory pokey poke or the attempts at a mandatory pokey poke. I'm sorry that I don't accept that doctors are bastions of morality. I think they're better than the average professional for sure, and I've got a lot of respect for them. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend that they are some sort of priestly class that must not have their motives questioned, shall we say? Especially in the anti-aging space where there is a lot of, or the aesthetic
Yeah.
space where there is a lot of money to be made.
And I think anyone who takes a step back and looks at being prescribed testosterone to alleviate symptoms of distressing symptoms of Parkinson's is not the same as trying to get look better in a t-shirt without the
Oh,
effort.
oh yeah, and people know the difference, right? People know the
Yeah.
difference. Like I'm really good friends with loads of guys who are on TRT for legitimate medical purposes, and not one of them has an issue with what I say on the matter. I can't train any of them. I've had to turn one of them down because of the no drugs policy. Because if you're so medically unwell as to need testosterone replacement therapy, then it's not. I'm not saying you shouldn't work with a personal trainer. I'm just saying that
It's not
my
your
methods as an online distance person is not the best option for you. So you need to go perhaps explore options with someone else in concert with your doctor.
yeah.
But none of them have an issue with what I say on the matter. It's only guys that are coping who, as you rightly say, they want the results without the effort, and it is the results without the effort.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it is. People say as well, oh yeah, you have to train just as hard, if not harder, when you're on steroids. Kind of true, but there are also studies. There was a really good study that I read a number of years ago, which I will not cite because I cannot remember the details. But essentially, it measured um, testosterone use, the effect of testosterone use on on population on a populate a study cohort population, and they put muscle on without even training.
Oh.
That without training. As I say, I wish I could remember the details. I swear on my daughter's life, I'm not making it up. I did read this study, but I cannot remember the details for the life of me. But the point is that and a cursory understanding of biology, pharmacokinetics, and pharmacodynamics. You know, you will know that shouldn't be a surprising conclusion to draw based on these drugs change the internal environment, how they move through the body, how they interact with body tissues and organs and things. It shouldn't be surprising to anyone to hear that you can if you take gear, you don't even need to train and it will put muscle on your frame.
Uh, I'm by no means your ideal client when your ideal client
We say that we've got a
avatar.
lady client.
This is true, but from something that you've certainly taught me a lot about is how widespread the use of steroids is in the fitness industry, and therefore how it informs the way fitness programs are written, and therefore they are intended for people who use.
Well, they're not intended for. So this is a so if you look at the history of weight training, let's go right back to 1900, okay, where it was kind of like circus strongmen. You think that again, I'm not going to go into tremendous amounts of detail because it's not the appropriate time or medium, but so I'm sure people will find things to nitpick about what I'm going to say, but I don't really care. Go back to around 1900, and you got your circus strongman style training. Bench press hadn't even been invented. They're doing all sorts of things. One of the peak strongman move was something called the two hands anyhow, which is where you would get as much weight over your head using two hands in any way that you could. Hence, two
Yeah.
hands anyhow. Typically, it was a barbell and a kettlebell, and I believe the all-time record for this was somewhere in the region of 400 pounds. And if you YouTube two hands anyhow, and you see how they do it, you will see it's a tremendous feat of athleticism, balance, coordination, strength, both eccentric strength, pushing things up, and also isometric strength, ability to hold your body in place. Oh, it's incredible. All done without the aid of steroids or other drugs. But you can't use those methods now with the average person in the population, right? I can't. I've tried to do two hands anyhow. I can just about do it with two kettlebells. I can't. I lack the coordination to really be able to do it with a barbell. For with one hand, yeah, with one hand on the barbell thing. It's just and unfortunately, I train in a gym where if I tried, there's too many people nearby, I'd probably kill someone. Um. So yeah, another kind of lifts like that were quite a lot of that. Then we go forward a little bit to the kind of post-war period, 19 well interwar and post-war period, so 1940 to 1959, is what's commonly touted as the so-called silver era of bodybuilding. So this is when weight training looked a lot more like it does today. So we had early weight training machines, barbells. Gyms looked like gyms. They had benches for bench presses. They had squat racks. All of these things. And the sorts of programs that people followed were the sorts of programs that you could comfortably fit around a normal life, because you couldn't make a living from bodybuilding, certainly. I mean, most sports you couldn't even make a living from back then. So the training reflected that. Also, again, steroids weren't quite on the scene. They were starting to pop up mainly in the Soviet Union at the time, kind of in the 50s, but they weren't in widespread mainstream use in the West, in America and the UK. So it's these times you're going to start seeing names like Reg Park and Steve Reeves are the two big ones for that. And then 1960 rolled around and testosterone just kind of exploded onto the scene. This is when you start seeing kind of Arnold Schwarzenegger, and you start seeing these full body routines. Now, under the desk at the moment, I've got Arnold Schwarzenegger's Encyclopedia of Modern Bodybuilding. If you look in the programs in there, like there's one on, I think it's about barely a tenth of the way through the book, and it's a 6 day a week program training morning and evening, with really high volume. So these really high volume approaches started to appear. Also, approaches with lots of isolation work, so dumbbells, cables, machines, to pump up the volume. And also because when your body is in such an anabolic environment because you're injecting shitloads of exogenous testosterone, right? Your body is primed to respond much better to training. So all of these little fine movements that you see, all these little isolation movements to tackle these little muscles, you can actually get really quite dramatic results from that because of the way that the body is physiologically and how it responds to training. Whereas before steroids were on the scene, the focus was much more on the boring barbell compound lifts, your squats, deadlifts, presses, because those are the things that give you most bang for your buck, and those that they give you sufficient stimulus for the natural body to respond to, and also, as I mentioned as well, the lifestyle factors around not being able to devote entire lives to training. So there's this big contrast. And subsequent to 1960, all of these kind of isolation-based routines, high-volume routines, were just disseminated generally by coaches, and then obviously and are now continue, muscle magazines. Then the internet came along, and people don't really know, why
Where they came from.
where they came from and why they came about. A classic example of this as well, move away from bodybuilding for a second, is powerlifting. So you see a lot of people well, online. I don't really see it in the gym. You won't really see it in the gym, but you certainly see it a lot online. Talking about using bands and chains, so putting a set of heavy chains on the end of a barbell. And the only reason that these came about, the use of chains came about from a place in America called Westside Barbell, Louis Simmons, and he trains the strongest powerlifters in the world. But they're what's called equipped powerlifters, so they use these special suits and briefs and things that are made out of Kevlar and all sorts of weird and wonderful materials. And those suits fundamentally change the strength curve in the lift. So if you imagine a barbell squat. The hardest part of the barbell squat is at the bottom, isn't it? When your butt your hips are slightly below your knees, you're in the bottom, you're in the hole. That's the hardest part, getting out of there. Well, when you wear a squat suit, that's actually one of the easiest parts of the lift because the suit is taking all of the weight. So it's kind of the opposite strength curve. Again, I'm oversimplifying this for the purposes of the conversation, but the reason these guys would train with chains on the end of the barbell to make it heavier as they locked out to simulate wearing the suit so they could train with lighter loads that, because at the end of the day, if you're going to stick 1,000 pounds on your back, that's going to cause all sorts of problems. You can't do that week in, week out, but you can stick a 500-pound barbell on your back with chains to get that same kind of training stimulus. But there's no, if you're not going to wear a squat suit, I will die on this hill. There's no need for you to be putting down chains on the barbell. But, and I say you see it a lot on the internet, I have seen PTs at various gyms I've trained at give their weak and weedy clients chains on the end of the bar. Because again, well, exercise experience, but also because they'll talk about muscle confusion or all these other nonsense theories. But the main thing is it makes their clients feel like they're doing something and feel special. But anyway, I've digressed massively.
Well, no, that was a bit of a Putin answer, wasn't it?
Mm,
But let me ask you this question. I'll give you 100 years history so that you properly understand why we've come to where we've come to.
yes.
I guess then the question is, how does this impact on your everyday lifter?
How does it impact on my everyday lifter? In what regard?
So these training
Oh,
programs.
yeah. So if you use a training program that's been built on methodologies that were invented once, post steroids, there's a not inconsiderable chance, or sorry, that was a double negative, wasn't it? That there's a high chance that the program that you're training with is unsuited to your needs, will likely burn you out, potentially injure you. Or best case scenario, because you'll be fart arsing about with machines, cables, and dumbbells instead of doing the meat and potato stuff that we've talked about time and time and time again, you're just not really going to get any results, and you're going to get bored, and you're going to quit.
Mm.
Yeah, a great example. I am forever overhearing in the gym guys bitching about achy joints. Oh, my knees hurt. Oh, my wrists hurt. Oh, my back hurts. Oh, my hips hurt. And you look at the way they train; they're just mucking about with all these machine movements and things. And I have overstepped on a few occasions and politely suggested that perhaps they should consider doing some basic barbell training. Oh, they won't do it. Oh, I can't squat. I mean, what do you mean you can't squat? And it's, oh, well, I can't. It hurts. I went, well, have you just tried it with an empty barbell? Well, I'm not going to do that. Yeah,
Mm.
it's because he wants to pretend to be strong by leg pressing 700 pounds.
Yeah.
This is the kind of hole that you can dig yourself into very quickly. So yeah, and I can say this with authority because I have tried these approaches as a natural lifter, and they do not work. They do not work, and I do not know anyone for whom they have worked who can't devote. The only exception are people who can devote their entire life to training. So there was a period where I could do that. We talked about it before when I was in Belfast, and I was following a very high volume approach, but I was single. My monthly outgoings were £912. I had no friends. I did nothing outside of my cushy office job other than go to the gym. I didn't even do my Warhammer, Jess.
No.
And even then, I was regularly feeling really crispy, really tired.
You have a supermarket between the gym and home, so you just pick up food on the way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And life was just so simple, and I wouldn't be able to do it now, and I wouldn't be, and I wouldn't, and I couldn't do it back then when I had a proper job, you know. So that's kind of my view on the matter. People are welcome to argue with me. They're also welcome to be wrong.
Well, on that note, I think we'll end.
Hmm.